welcome back to the Unseen Podcast, a podcast dedicated to missing people, unresolved cases, and UK true crime. Today we are exploring a very sad case from West Yorkshire. The murder of 23-year-old Laurence Winstanley was not only violent and unnecessary, but also mysterious. This case really saddened me when I researched it, and I was completely devastated for his family. Laurence's case also resonated with me for another reason, as it occurred not far away from me, and many of the locations involved in this case are very familiar. As always, this episode contains descriptions that some listeners may find distressing, so listener discretion is advised. Baitings Reservoir is located close to Ripondon in the West Yorkshire Pennines. Being located on Rochdale Road, it is also close to the town of Littleborough in the borough of Rochdale in Greater Manchester. The reservoir has consistently been a place where visitors enjoy taking weekend strolls, and in the summertime it can get quite busy with people wanting to see the views in the area. The summer of 1989 had been no exception, as it had been quite hot and the weather had been very clear and warm. The warm weather meant that the water levels at the reservoir were lower than usual, and as the summer came to an end and September arrived, the levels had still not raised up to normal. On the 26th of September 1989, a visitor at Baitings Dam spotted something that had partially floated up to the surface of the water. When they looked closer, the visitor noticed that the object looked strange, and it was eventually determined that it resembled a body. The police were called to the scene to investigate what had been found. As they waded into the water, it was clear that the witness had been correct. They discovered a body partially weighed down in the water. It was initially unclear whether the body was that of a man or a woman, however after further examination it was determined to be the body of a man. From the decomposition noted on his body, he had been in the water for a while. The body had been covered in what looked like a roll of material, but would later be confirmed as a curtain. The man's body was in a terrible condition due to the state of decomposition and also the nature of the injuries that had been sustained. What was obvious to police was that whoever this victim was, he had suffered a horrific death, and they were most definitely dealing with a murder. It was later established that he had been severely beaten and had multiple fractures to his body. The body also showed signs of burning, and it was found that the perpetrator had attempted to burn it before putting it into the reservoir. Another shocking discovery was that the man had actually been shot in the head. This was a very alarming part of the discovery and showed a ferocity to the attack. The police were able to conclude that the perpetrator or perpetrators had tied up the victim either prior to the shooting or afterwards, and then wrapped the body in a curtain. They had then attached the head of a pickaxe to the body using some rope to weigh it down in the water. This was a calculated move on the perpetrator's part, and it was quite obvious that they had some knowledge of how to dispose of a body. Detective Superintendent Trevor Wilkinson was put in charge of the investigation, and he stated to the Liverpool Echo on October 2nd, 1989, that the water levels in the reservoir had reduced by 50 feet, and if it hadn't been for the dry conditions that summer, the body may not have been found. The task of finding out who the victim was, however, did not take long for the detectives, and it was soon found that the body was that of 23-year-old Laurence Winstanley, who had been reported missing a year prior. The investigation now set upon finding out what had happened to Laurence Winstanley and how he became the victim of such a disgusting murder. The police started looking into Laurence's life and examining the days before and after he went missing. Laurence Winstanley lived in Oldham in Greater Manchester, and his family moved to the area of Shaw about a year before he disappeared. It's reported in the Liverpool Echo newspaper in 1989 that he lived in Shover, an area of Oldham close to Shaw where he shared a flat. He worked as a mechanic and had his own garage in the area. He was a hard-working man with a keen interest in cars, therefore he had been working long hours after getting his own garage to get his business off the ground. Police were keen to examine Laurence's usual routine and compare it to the days before and after his disappearance. Laurence would regularly work quite long hours and then visit his local pub, the Windsor, for a few drinks. He would also usually include a visit to his mum's house and would sometimes call there 2 or 3 times a day, as her home was only located a 5-minute drive away from the garage. A Crime Watch reconstruction was made of Laurence's day in 1990 to try and raise awareness of his murder, and it was clear that the police were able to piece together a large portion of the timeline. Laurence had disappeared on the 2nd of October 1988, which was a Sunday, and it was known that he had been working at the garage that morning. At about lunchtime, it was known that he made a trip to the local pub, the Windsor, located on Shaw Road in Royton, where he had a couple of drinks. This pub was around an 8-minute drive from the area of Shover. It was not unusual to see Laurence at the pub, as he was a regular. However, it was noted that he was not normally seen there at dinner time. It was known that he hadn't been there that long, as while he was at the pub he received a phone call. Laurence took this phone call and then told people he had to go, as he had to visit his mum. Witnesses said that he suddenly appeared agitated and left the pub to get into his Ford Cortina that was parked outside. Upon investigation, however, it was clear that Laurence had not gone straight to his mum's house, as it was known that he arrived after 3 o'clock, over an hour later. The journey would have ordinarily taken around 5 minutes, so it was odd that he arrived so much later. The conclusion was that he must have gone somewhere else first. The police, however, are unable to establish where Laurence had been for that hour before he arrived at his mum's house. Laurence arrived and spoke to his mum, explaining that he had to rush off, but wanted to tell her to have a nice trip as she was going away. He also gave her some money to spend while she was away. The reconstruction outlined that he spent a few minutes with his mum and then rushed off when he found out it was 3:30, saying he had things to do, and telling her he would see her when she got back. The next sighting of Laurence was again in the Windsor pub that evening. He was in there having a drink and spoke to some people while he was there, including a builder who he knew. The pair chatted for a while in the pub, and Laurence told him he was leaving. It's reported in the reconstruction that no one actually saw him leaving the pub, and it was established that the builder may have been the last person who saw him alive. After he left the pub, Laurence appeared to just disappear. The police could not establish where he went next, or if he met anyone else that night. When Laurence did not reappear after a few days, and he didn't contact anyone, it became clear to his family and friends that something was wrong. The police began to investigate his disappearance, and it was clear that both he and his car were nowhere to be found. The police that were looking into his disappearance at the time could find no reason in his past or current life that would make him want to disappear. The information about Laurence's disappearance was documented in the media at the time, and this led to a tip coming into police around 3 weeks after his disappearance. A man had been walking through a local scrapyard and noticed a red Ford Cortina parked up, and he thought it looked familiar. He checked the registration plate and noticed the number SAT 385W and decided to ring the police. The man had read about Laurence's disappearance in a local newspaper and recognised the car described. This was a huge breakthrough for the investigation, as it meant that they could at least trace Laurence's car, despite the fact in 1988 they had not yet found him. This enabled investigators to question the staff at the scrapyard and search for any records that they might have. They discovered that the car had been dropped off at the scrapyard at 7:35 on the morning of Tuesday the 4th of October, 2 days after Laurence went missing. 3 men were seen at the scrapyard that morning, and one of the men gave the name of Burrows to the staff member working that day. It was known that it was unlikely that Laurence would have taken his car to the scrapyard willingly, as he had only recently bought it and it had cost him £350. His plan was to do the car up and sell it on again for more money. Detective Superintendent Trevor Wilkinson spoke about this tip on the Crime Watch episode and explained that they believed it was a significant lead. He said the car could have been taken in by someone on behalf of someone else, and this person may not have been directly connected to the crime. He appealed for that person to come forward and stated that he understood why they may not want to come forward due to the horrific way in which Laurence had been killed. The police speculated that the car must have been either put into a garage or parked somewhere else before it was then moved to the scrapyard in the 2 days after the murder took place. Trevor Wilkinson also appealed for anyone that may be able to give them more information about the phone call that Laurence received in the pub. They had been unable to trace this call or find out any more information about it. The only information that the police had was that the content of the call had worried him. Trevor Wilkinson then went on to provide some previously unknown information. He produced both the pickaxe head and the rope that was used to weigh it down. He explained that the pickaxe head appeared new, and it looked as though it had been purchased or even stolen for the purpose of weighing down Lawrence's body. He stated that it had been manufactured in South America and was only distributed by one manufacturer in the UK, which was Chiltern Manufacturing, located in Eccles in Salford in Greater Manchester. The rope was referred to as a sash cord and was manufactured in Bolton by a company called Anderson's. It was labelled flaxine solid braided synthetic cord. He also clarified that the cord could also have been bought straight from the manufacturer, James Levers and Son of Orient Mills in Bolton in Greater Manchester. This type of cord would not have had a label on it and would just be a length of cord. Trevor Wilkinson explained that if anyone had sold the two objects together and remembered doing this, he would like it if they would get in touch with the police. He also said even if they saw a person with both items or had the two things stolen around the 2nd of October, they should also get in touch. The police explained that they had reason to believe that Lawrence's body had been put into the reservoir on Monday evening, the 3rd of October. They asked for anyone that may have been around the area at the time and may have seen something to come forward. The final piece of information that was divulged on the episode was that as a result of previous trailers documenting what was going to be contained in that particular episode, a man had already rung in to explain that he had some information that may relate to the case. He reportedly gave the police a name and said that he knew of a woman that had some vital information. He told police he would watch the programme and then ring back up with his tip. Trevor Wilkinson appealed for this person to get back in touch. It's unclear if this tip did go anywhere or if the person got back in touch after the show. During the year 1990, 80 officers conducted raids on houses in the areas of Rochdale and Littleborough. Following on from these raids, a man was questioned in relation to the murder. However, this man was released with no charge being brought against him. Years went by in the case, and in 2001 it was announced that Lawrence's mum, Vanessa, was putting up a reward of £25,000 for anyone that had any information about Lawrence's murder. The reward was coming directly from her savings, and it was hoped that it would persuade anyone connected with the crime to come forward. Unfortunately, this is not what happened, and at the 20th anniversary of Lawrence's murder, the police again found themselves appealing to the public for any information. They also added to the reward with another £10,000 to anyone that could help them. This appeal sadly also did not lead to any new information. The police maintained that Lawrence's case was still open, and they were hoping that someone would eventually come forward with a new lead. At the end of 2017, West Yorkshire Police were seen searching a pond close to Blackstone Edge Road in the Rochdale town of Littleborough. This pond is just over 3 miles from Baitings Reservoir, where Lawrence's body had been found. The police did state that the search was in connection with Lawrence's murder. They stated in 2017, "Enquiries remain ongoing. West Yorkshire Police has made a key commitment that a case is never closed until it's resolved. This is to give, where possible, victims and their families closure. As part of this commitment to victims, we continuously review our undetected homicides and serious sexual offences." It's clear that the police must have been working on some kind of tip when searching the pond. However, what this was or what they were looking for has never been disclosed to the public. In 2018, police once again made an appeal to the public, as it had now been 30 years since Lawrence had originally gone missing. Detective Superintendent Jim Dunkerley from West Yorkshire Police Homicide and Major Inquiry Team made a statement to the public. The Manchester Evening News reported that he said, "It's now 30 years since Laurence Winstanley went missing and his subsequent murder. The amount of time that has passed in no way diminishes our desire to achieve justice for the victim and his family. Lawrence's murder was a targeted attack. We believe that his killer did not act alone. I would urge anyone who may hold any information to come forward and assist in bringing the killers to justice." We know that people move in and out of areas and there are changes in relationships. Allegiances also change, and it's possible someone had suspicions back then that they didn't feel that they could or should act on, but now feel differently. That person could hold the key to finding answers we and the Winstanley family are so desperate for. We actively review our cold cases, and any small bit of information could help to unlock the answers and bring some closure for his family after all these years. West Yorkshire Police emphasised that they were still hopeful that the case could be solved, and that after 30 years someone may decide to come forward. The fact that the police are still open to new information and have not given up on the case is definitely a positive sign, and is not something that you always see in cases that are over 30 years old. So what did happen to Laurence Winstanley on the 2nd of October 1988? It was clear that whoever had committed this crime had targeted Laurence specifically and could have known his movements. Laurence was working that Sunday and had popped into the pub, which was not odd. However, it was noticed that he was in there earlier than usual and would not normally be seen there at that time. This is when he received the phone call which witnesses and friends say appeared to alarm him. He then told them he was going to his mum's house, however did not arrive until later. This implies that he stopped off somewhere, perhaps as a result of the phone call. He then didn't stay long at his mum's as he said he had to rush off. As Laurence then disappeared later that night, it was more than likely that this phone call had something to do with his disappearance, and possibly his murder. Was this someone who knew Laurence? Was there something that Laurence had been keeping from his family and his friends? The police had since described this as almost like a gangland execution, as the perpetrator or perpetrators knew to weigh down his body so it would not be detected, and to also hide his car at the scrapyard. He had also been shot in the head. It's safe to say that the people who dropped off Laurence's car at the scrapyard either had something to do with this murder, or at least knew something about it. The motive for killing Laurence, however, is not clear, as it appeared that he led a normal life and was a kind and generous person who had recently started his business and wanted to make something of it. Was he in the wrong place at the wrong time? There are many questions that still need answers in this case, but I do believe that it could be solved. And like the police, I think it could come from a tip from someone in the community where Laurence lived. His family deserved to find out what happened to him, and his story really makes me sad and angry. Laurence's mum Vanessa spoke about him in 2009 at one of the appeals for information. She stated, "Laurence was a wonderful son. The whole family have lost their normal lives. We only function in the hope that this will come to a close, that the perpetrators will be brought to justice, and that Laurence will finally be laid to peace." If you know anything about the murder of Laurence Winstanley in 1988, please contact West Yorkshire Police on 101 or contact Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111. Thank you for listening to today's episode about Laurence's case. His story really is a sad and puzzling one. If you want to help the podcast, please review it wherever you listen, or you can simply tell me what you thought of it. You can connect with me on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter at The Unseen Podcast, where you can see pictures from the cases, updates or just chat to me. If you would like to support the podcast on Patreon, you can receive shout-outs in the show, stickers and also bonus episodes. I have just released the most recent Patreon episode about the disappearance of Ruth Wilson. The link is in the show notes. Thank you to our newest patrons, Jay and Ian. I really appreciate your support. I love receiving any suggestions for future episodes, so if you have any that are close to you or think may fit the show, please let me know on social media or at my email address, theunseenpod@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for listening, and until next time, I'm Caprice, and this has been Unseen.